very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. Once again, I wish to begin this episode by thanking our sponsor, Sir David Seal, and the folks of the People's Market for their continued interest in the production of this series, My Community. We thank you. Now, the destruction caused by the Great Hurricane of 1831 remains a pivotal chapter in Barbados' 19th century history. Thankfully, Dr. Henderson Carter, along with his colleagues and students, have researched the historical records and are now sharing their findings with all of us. Their research primarily draws from history from above, focusing on institutional and structural narratives rather than the experiences of individuals. This underscores the importance of recording personal accounts so that they too can become part of the official record. Your personal history matters, yes it does, and contributing that history ensures that there is a more inclusive and comprehensive understanding of events and of a time period in Barbados. It is fitting that this episode of My Community explores the destruction of the churches by the Great Hurricane of 1831. As the Anglican Diocese celebrates its bicentenary in Barbados this year, we are reminded of the significant role churches and chapels of ease played in our communities. In 1831, these edifices were not just places of worship, but were regarded as among the most revered structures on the Barbadian landscape, symbolizing faith, resilience, and communal identity, albeit among a certain class at that time. This is the Great Hurricane of 1831 and its impact on the churches in Barbados.
Churches. Those were some of the other buildings that sustained significant damage. Churches on the island, like everything else, were heavily damaged during the 1831 hurricane. They took a battering as well.
They had gone through tremendous transitions. Almost every parish church has had at least 4 buildings at different times, beginning with a wooden church, then a stone church. Then the 1780 hurricane demolished many churches, most churches if not all. And the 4 churches that were rebuilt in 1780 survived the 1831 hurricane. Those churches were the Church of St. Michael, which became the cathedral, St. George's Parish Church.
Construction of the new church commenced in the middle years of 1783. By 1784, this new building had been constructed to much of its current splendor. This church stood as a beacon for the ecclesiastical faith on the island, and it was frequently visited by the elite of the parish, who came here to not only seek counsel in God, but to thank God for their blessings and hope and wish for a continuation of their good fortune. Sometime after midnight on August the 10th, that changed. Rattled by strong winds, lightning, and thunder, and the screams of persons huddled closely within this church seeking shelter, it lost its parsonage. Subsequent to losing its parsonage, it lost its famous tower. So as people screamed, where they huddled closely within this church, persons ran through these gates and ran into the open fields, huddling together for safety. In addition to its parsonage, its tower, a portion of its roof would have been damaged, and given the state of social affairs on the island after 1831, it was deemed important that this church rebuilt and rebuilt quickly. Why it had to be rebuilt quickly? It was believed by persons of faith that in order for a community to thrive, in order for a community to withstand the moral decay which was permeating certain areas of Bridgetown, that it was important that a strong church, a vibrant church, a thriving church factor into the social package, which included not only enslavement, economics, but also Christianity. And in fact, one other reason why it was deemed important that this church be built, not only to maintain the social fabric of the community, but hurricanes cause disruption. And it was felt by persons of faith, as well as parishioners, to prevent riots, because there were riots in other areas of the island as a result of the carnage caused by this great hurricane. And the members of the vestry and the parochial authorities of this parish wanted to make sure that such things not happen here. So the urgent rebuilding of this church was seen as a peacemaking or peace-maintaining initiative.
Now, let us turn our attention now to the other end of the island, more specifically the northeastern side. What do the historical records tell us about the state of the church situated in the heart of the Scotland district?
That would suffer some damage as well. The church was originally across the street from here, closer to the Sandhole, where the old graveyard exists. And during the passage of the hurricane, it did receive some damage. The eastern wall was shattered. The roof was mostly damaged. Many of the shingles came off the roof. And the Reverend Lewis at the time, he was able to collect them, around 20,000 of them, and store them within the church. The church yard wall was completely damaged as well. But the Reverend was able to protect the organ and the 10 Commandments tablets by wrapping them in olive skins. So he's able to preserve those. The cost for retrofitting the church was estimated around £500. It would be repaired, but that did not exist too long after that. And eventually, it would be moved to this site as this building will be erected around 1846. The schoolhouse, which had been newly built, was completely destroyed. And the rectory, that also was completely destroyed.
As it relates to the parish church, the St. James Church, that was the least affected of the Anglican churches in Barbados, suffering minor damage to the roof.
None of those four were demolished in the 1831 hurricane. All of the other parish churches were demolished or very, very badly damaged in the 1831 hurricane, except, of course, for St. Joseph. Well, the old St. Joseph was demolished, but the present, now ruined St. Joseph Church wasn't built until 1848.
In terms of the northern parishes, St. Lucy was completely destroyed. 2 school children escaped from the school and ran onto the porch of the church, seeking refuge because they felt that the church would be more able to withstand the gale force wind of the hurricane than their school. Unfortunately, that did not happen. The church collapsed and they were never seen again. The school did suffer some damage. It was able to be repaired and was utilized for services after the passage of the hurricane. St. Peter Church will also suffer some damage. The church was completely destroyed except for the tower, which was unroofed. The chapel at All Saints, that also was destroyed.
The parish church, St. Peter's Church,
and St. Philip were all destroyed in 1831, along with those at Christ Church and St. Thomas. But Christ Church and St. Thomas were devastated before in earlier strikes, and specifically the hurricane of 1780 was the last one that had taken those two out prior to 1831.
So the first church was actually sited at Dover, near Dover Beach, and in 1669 that building was flooded out. And when it was flooded out, they decided to move the church to the present site. And there have been about 4 other churches on this site, and this is the last one, the 5th one. The second one was destroyed by the 1780 hurricane. And then in 1831, which is the purpose of this whole series, we're looking at the 1831 hurricane. It was also destroyed completely. And then in 1935, it was destroyed by fire and rebuilt. And this is the present building that we're looking at today. So you can see how fragile our heritage is. So not only our built heritage, but our archival heritage. All of the objects that come to us are all vulnerable to the types of calamities that we in the Caribbean experience, and particularly those that are climate related, even today. And those are often the things that people don't think about, is just how difficult it has been to maintain this patrimony over the years.
St. John Parish Church was another casualty of this devastating hurricane.
Here we are at the historic St. John's Parish Church, built in 1645, first as a wooden church. Now in 1675, when that hurricane came through here, the church was blown down, and the authorities made the decision to rebuild that church sometime after. Now, this church stands on a beautiful escarpment. We call it Hackleton's Cliff, over 1,000 feet high. And you can look over and see Bathsheba. You can look down and see as far as St. Lucy. But after this church was rebuilt, another hurricane came in 1780. This is the Great Hurricane of 1780. This time it was a stone building, but that stone building also came down. Third time, rebuilt again after 1780, and this time we have the Great Hurricane of 1831. As that hurricane wreaked havoc across Barbados, many churches were blown down, including this church here to my right, the historic St. John's Parish Church. That was also blown down. As a matter of fact, only 4 churches in Barbados were left standing. Most of the parish churches, including this one, were blown down. But this church is also important for the rebuilding of it. And a bit later, we will talk about how this church was rebuilt. But before we get there, we are going to talk about a Greek descendant, Fernando Paleogelis, who was found here under the organ loft in 1831. So this is the organ loft. So his body, Paleogelis' body, was found buried in quicklime in this area under the organ loft, and of course taken from out of the rubble when this hurricane was destroyed in 1831, and rebuilt and moved, of course, from this area into a more secure tomb in the graveyard. And I'll tell you a little bit about Paleogelis. He came here from London in the 17th century, and he became a vestryman. He became a plantation owner as well. St. John's Parish Church is famous for the burial of its aristocrats. And of course, the leading aristocrat here is Fernando Paleogelis. It says here, church warden of this parish, 1655, 1656, and vestryman for 20 years. Now, this is a political post. The parish vestries basically took care of all the parochial matters in the parish, matters relating to pensioners, poor relief, roads, scholarships, exhibitions, you name it. This was the age of local government. So each parish had a vestry, and Paleogelis served as a vestryman for over 20 years. And that is why he is buried here in the churchyard. Death, of course, October 1678. And most of the planters, the white planters, were buried here in this St. John's churchyard. And of course, if you were to look around, you see the tombs, the massive tombs of the planters. For example, you have Joseph Briggs Mears, who was a leading planter here in Barbados, as well as a planter in British Guyana. This is the grave of Henry Seeley, known as the only standing grave in the St. John's Parish Church. And the story is that Henry Seeley, while he was alive, loved this view so much that he reportedly said that on his death, he would like to be buried standing so that he could see the view. And the people who buried him took him very seriously, so that when he was interred here, this coffin was interred standing, as ordained by Mr. Seeley while he was alive. This coffin was interred standing so that he could actually see the view. So this is known as the Seeley grave, or the standing grave. And what a beautiful view it is, but I don't think Mr. Seeley can see the view now. But I also want to make the point that not only were there white planters buried here, we have some very important black businessmen that are also buried in the St. John's Parish Church. Here to my left is the grave of Charles Miller Austin. Born in 1857, he died in 1942. Miller Austin is one of our prominent black entrepreneurs who was a wheelwright, who painted in a wheel, and he made a lot of money from his exploits. And he bought a plantation called Malvern around 1898, a plantation nearly 300 acres in size. It was a major purchase, so important that Charles Miller Austin could not approach the person who was selling the land directly. So he had to give this money to another person to buy the land for him. So this is a very important achievement, because to buy a plantation like Malvern in 1898, when there were very, very few black people owning land, is critical. And Charles Miller Austin developed that plantation. I understand it is still in the hands of the family. And his grandson is the former Prime Minister of Barbados, Harold Bernard St. John. Sir Harold, very important person. So we have the grave here of Charles Miller Austin. And on my right, there's also the grave of Bernard Leslie Barrow, also a vestryman. Bernard Leslie Barrow was a owner of a lot of land in St. John, but he had a shop in Messiah Street. He was also a parliamentarian representing St. John. So this is a very important political figure. This is also an important entrepreneur, Bernard Leslie Barrow. He died in 1962 at the age of 88. And sometimes when we come to this graveyard, we only see the white people, the white planters, but it is important to know that we have some black entrepreneurs as well who made their mark on the political and economic landscape of Barbados. So this church, this Gothic church, and you can see by the pointed windows, you can see by the pointed arches and by the buttresses, this wonderful Gothic church that was rebuilt in 1835, 1836. But who was the rebuilder? When this church was rebuilt in 1836, it was built in a more sturdy fashion. For example, you have the buttresses. These areas here to my left, you can see these protruding areas here. to my left, these are called buttresses, and these help to support the weight of the church. The builder of this church was a formerly enslaved man. His name is Adam Straw Waterman. Adam Straw Waterman was born in 1803 and emancipated sometime before 1834. He married, and he was an apprentice to a mason, so that by 1835-36, he was an accomplished mason, and he was able to rebuild this church in 1836. Now, even though we don't have a plaque to that extent, the plaque is really on his burial site at the other church, St. George Parish Church.
And apparently he was a very powerful man. He is reputed to have reintroduced, should I say, and developed on a major scale the two-handled saw, a 6-foot saw, which you can see at Newland Greenwich's museum down in St. Andrew. A two-handled saw which allowed the workers in the quarries to create coral stone blocks, which were of a standard size, 2 feet long and 1 foot square at the ends. And these big coral stone blocks, which would have required 2 men to lift, or a very strong man individually, they were the components for building churches like St. John's Church. And it allowed the churches and major houses and buildings to be rebuilt within 5 years. So after 1831, St. John's Church was completed by 1836, and most of the parish churches were completed between 1835 and 1838.
But he was a phenomenal man. Not only was he able to rebuild this church, but he also built a factory at Kendall, St. John. Kendall is one of our largest sugar plantations, over 700 acres, and there's a plaque there at Kendall testifying to that. And he also built his own factory because as a landowner, he realized that the planters weren't processing his canes in good time. So Adam Straw Waterman decided that he would build his own factory. And if you go to Greens, you can see the windmill, you can see the factory walls of Adam Straw Waterman. He became a vestryman at the parish of St. George, and his burial site is in the St. George Parish Church. So when we come to this site, this historic site, it is important for us to remember the man who rebuilt this, the great stonemason Adam Straw Waterman, who rebuilt this in 1836. And he is the one who this church, I think, must honor going forward as a great stonemason who put things in order after the church was blown down.
Well, I couldn't agree with Dr. Henderson Carter more. It is indeed time for Adam Straw Waterman to be properly memorialized at this site. It is insufficient to merely highlight the members of the plantocracy who are interred here in the yard of St. John's Parish Church. Without a doubt, the church itself stands as the most significant monument on these grounds, and it is incumbent upon the church to take responsibility for erecting a fitting memorial or plaque somewhere on this site. Such a tribute would honor the remarkable achievements of Adam Straw Waterman, who, despite being born into slavery, demonstrated extraordinary ingenuity in rebuilding this edifice after it was destroyed by the Great Hurricane of 1831. Well, fortunately, while we await action from the church, I am delighted to share that Barbados's first poet laureate, Esther Phillips, has immortalized Adam Straw Waterman in her attempt to ensure that his name is forever emblazoned throughout Barbados.
It's called Stone Master. The title is Stone Master, in memory of Adam Straw Waterman. Hero of wood, and drawer of water. How you transformed these dire predictions. Numbered among the dispossessed, how could you guess the sun would never set upon your years as slave? What spirit crossing seas and oceans counseled you, trained your fingers in the alchemy that breathes in stone? Who tuned your ear to subterranean song only the gifted hear? I have to stop there to explain to you that Adam Straw Waterman was known as one of the greatest builders in stone. Okay? Speak, stones, bear witness. Tell how the buffetings of wind and hurricane could not destroy the walls still left here standing nearly 200 years. A testament to skill, the craftsmanship of this true son of Africa. Say how the singing of the stones in Mpumalanga, vibrations deep in your ancestral memory, pulsed through your hands that built the St. John's Parish Church and echoes through the walls, blending with the organ music Sunday after Sunday. Playing as children in the old mill, balancing arms outstretched along a low broken bridge, picking up almonds under the tree near Smitty's stone hut. We did not know those walls, dark grey with age, were monuments to hope in adversity, pride in our ancestry, a quiet faith that destiny will speak for those who persevere and overcome. Waterman Straw, Adams Straw Waterman, more than a playground, the name of a master carving his lessons in stone. Someone should build a monument, some kind of memorial to Adam Straw Waterman, because I try to imagine what he would have come up against as a black man, ex-slave, attempting to go into this world of architecture building, because you know we hear so much about the buildings and the historical buildings. Does anybody ever pay any attention to who built them? So I want someone to put that monument up to him, because he built not only the remains of the walls you see there. There was the remains also of a plantation house, a smaller one that he built. And then the walls, there's a tank there as well, and they have remained to this day. That to me is what is amazing. We have all kinds of things falling down, but those have remained. And I think it is a matter of history that we record that Adam Straw Waterman, who then went on apparently to be very helpful to other people in his situation, and he's now buried at the St. George Parish Church. If you check there, you will see. But that is extremely important to me. We need to make note of these things. It's important to our young black men to see that struggle, to see that challenges, to see that adversity, all these things are part and parcel of human life. They're not. It's true that slavery put us at a disadvantage, but we can rise from there. We can rise from that. Adam Straw Waterman is a perfect example of such.
Well, this has been Mind Community, the impact of the 1831 Great Hurricane on the churches of Barbados. More importantly, we have explored the introduction of a groundbreaking construction style here in Barbados, thanks to the remarkable work of Adam Straw Waterman, a style that embodies strength, courage, and resilience. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Take good care of yourself, and as always, remember to look out for the well-being of your neighbors. Everywhere I go.